Graphing a quadratic can be a little tricky depending on what your equation is, but it doesn't have to be if you use the right tools and situations. A quadratic is anything in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. Now, the reason why it's called a quadratic is because you have an x to the power of 2. Now, most of you will probably like to graph it using a graphing calculator or using Desmos, but there are times when you will need to graph it by hand, and there are a couple different situations on how you can do that in terms of graphing. When we're dealing with a quadratic, one of the first things I always tell kids is to find the vertex. Now, if you were to have a graph, a quadratic, by the way, is in the shape of a U. This is what we call a parabola. The vertex is either the min or the max. So what we're doing there is we are finding where is the lowest point, where is the highest point, and that basically decides where the curve is going to go. With that, the vertex is actually located when the x-coordinate is negative b over 2a. Now, that negative b and that a come from the original equation of that ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're going to start with an easy one to get us started. So if I were to have 1x squared minus 3. So looking at this, a is going to be 1, b, there is no bx, so it's 0, and c is negative 3. Now the c doesn't mean anything for right now, but it will later on, so I just want to make sure that we mention a, b, and c. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and find the x-coordinate of the vertex. I have negative 0 over 2 times 1, therefore it is 0. So in order to find the y-coordinate of that vertex, you're going to plug that into the situation. When I plug that in, y is now 1 times 0 squared minus 3, which is negative 3. My vertex is located then at 0, negative 3. So looking at the graph, I'm going to go ahead and plot that point, 0, negative 3. So why is this vertex important? This vertex tells me that if I go to the left or the right, those points are going to be the same. They're going to be symmetrical. I know where the curve is going to go. My curve is either going to go up here or it's going to go down here like this. That's what I know from that situation because I have that vertex point. So what we do after that, since I know that that's my vertex, I'm either going to pick a point to the left or to the right and basically create a T-chart. So I know that 0 is my vertex, so I'm going to get a couple more points. I'm going to pick 1 and 2. I already know that 0 is at negative 3. Now plug 1 into that situation and see what you get. Well, 1 squared is 1, times 1 is 1, minus 3 gives me negative 2. Now plug 2 in. 2 squared gives me 4, times 1 is still 4, minus 3 gives me 1. So I'm going to plot those points. I have 1, negative 2, and 2, 1. So I know that curve is going that direction. Since it's the vertex, if I go to the left, I'm going to get the same y-coordinates. So if I go negative 1, I know that that's the same y value. And if I go negative 2, it's the same y value from there. So now I've got my curve. And that's my quadratic by graphing using the vertex formula. Now, sometimes it does get a little bit trickier where your vertex is not necessarily on the y-axis. It could be shifted over. let's say that we have negative x squared minus 4x minus 3 equals our y. So my a is negative 1, b is negative 4, and c is negative 3. So we're going to find our vertex. So x equals, it's a negative negative 4 over 2 times negative 1. So this is 4 over negative 2, which gives me negative 2 as my x coordinate. And then I'm going to plug that in and figure out the y coordinate. Now notice here, when I'm plugging that negative 2 back in, I am putting parentheses in there. Now, if you don't put parentheses when you square your calculator, it will have probably an error. And I say that because it's taking the square first and then adding the negative afterwards. When we do this, we get, and if you can type that right into your calculator, you'll get 1 as your y. So our vertex is located at negative 2, 1. So we're going to go ahead and plot that point. So now I know where my vertex is located. I'm either going to go to the right or the left. I have a tendency to always go to the right. You might not like that. It doesn't matter. Your whole goal here is to get your t-chart set up. So negative 2 was our vertex point. So I'm going to go with negative 1 and then 0. So if I plug negative 1 into the original, I'm going to get a number. I already know that if I plug 0 in, it's negative 3. This point, if I plug negative 1 in, oh, let's see here. I'm going to get negative 1 plus 4 minus 3. So if you look at that, that's going to cancel out to give me 0. So now we're going to plot that point. So again, I've got the right side there. Ooh, sorry about that. So I'm going to go ahead and just do the reflection over top of that. And there's my quadratic. So graphing quadratics doesn't have to be that tricky as long as you figure out where your vertex is. Then you can figure out your t-chart and make that reflection. Again, it's based off of your A, B, and C. We will talk about graphing using the graphing calculator and what other things you might be looking for using the graphing calculator.